I want to talk about let's
This
debunk.
man just ganked you.
Let's debunk the deep squat. Let's
do it.
Let's do
That's
it.
my
man.
line.
Let's do it.
Well, I stole it. Let's talk about why. What is your opinion on deep squatting?
Let's do it. So whenever I teach a seminar or whenever I'm teaching, where I was teaching at the University of Missouri last year, one of the questions I always ask, I go, raise the hands, right? Who here has heard that deep squats are bad for your knees, right?
I can't believe it's 2016
Exactly.
and we're still having this conversation.
Everyone's hands shoot up, right? Instantly I say,
Yeah.
you're wrong, right? But here's the reason, right? You have to have a why behind everything, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Where did this all start from, right? Well, to actually answer that, we have to go back in history, right?
Way
So,
back in the time.
History 101, squat history 101. 1950s, right, down in Texas. There's a doctor by the name of
After the episode, head over to iTunes or the Apple Podcast app if you have an iPhone, or the Stitcher app if you have an Android device. Go ahead and subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that. Enjoy.
Right now?
Turn this down a little bit.
With
Where?
Carl Sagan, too.
Oh, there they are.
There you go.
Yeah.
I need to get a ball real quick.
You're a ball.
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah. No, Cosmos, that's like if you're just chilling
Yeah.
Sunday, you don't really have anything to do.
That's what it's all about,
like
man.
turn on that Netflix and
Yeah.
just watch
Sir.
Cosmos.
Dude, the amount of Netflix we
Can you
watch
see
is
him on the
crazy.
Can you see him on the shirt, Alex?
Yeah, I see it.
Neil, Carl Sagan.
I always put it on when I'm trying to go to sleep. Brandy's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "It's space," and I'm tired now.
What's your favorite Cosmos episode?
Ooh,
The black holes.
I like the one where they
Oh,
figured
black
out
holes are nuts.
with the infrared.
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
a cool
Man,
one. I
yeah.
forget the dude's name that they were talking about, but where he figured out.
No, it was
the,
a woman. It was a woman that figured it out.
Okay.
Yeah, they were
This was
no,
a
they were, it was,
guy.
no, it was spectrum. It was they were looking at spectrum of stars.
The light spectrum.
No.
Yeah, that was a woman.
I thought it was a dude.
No. I thought you were talking about the colors in that come out of the prism.
Yeah.
Oh,
what I'm
yeah,
talking
no,
about.
that was the dude,
infrared
yeah.
is invisible.
I didn't mean to
because-
say infrared.
Oh yeah.
I meant to say
that-
the
and the
prism.
temperature was
Well,
higher.
yeah, because they were looking at
We're just random.
This is why we let them talk about it.
We need to
I need
do-
to catch up on the show now.
This is
you
why
guys
we
have
need-
convinced me I
oh,
need
yeah.
to watch this
To
show
be
now.
fair, me and this guy were probably intoxicated when we were watching it.
This guy is Barbell Buddha. So this episode today is brought to you by Barbell Buddha, the collected writings of Chris Moore.
Let's see it.
If you want to grab a copy of this book,
I can't wait.
Just
to
came
crack
out.
that
Here,
open.
hold it
Yep,
up.
just
Yeah.
came out fresh off the press. Go to
That's legit.
barbellbuddha.com and get your own copy. It's got all three of his published books in there,
Flip through
and
it a
then
little bit.
some extra stuff as well. And it's got big print for
Yeah.
people like me.
I'm excited. I gotta go pick mine up from
Dude,
the
I'm
house.
definitely getting a copy.
This is
yeah,
legit.
I pre-ordered mine, but
It's
yeah,
on the back.
Very cool.
Oh yeah, there you
Boom.
yeah.
Ta-da.
So go support them. That'll go and
To Chris
help
and his kids.
Chris and his
or his
kids.
wife and his kids.
Max and May and Janie.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, man. So
Right on.
we were talking about how bad we were butchering the stories of Cosmos, and yeah, Chris actually turned me on to that show. But I've always said we need to do drunk history fitness versions. I want to do
Oh
like a
my
drunk
God.
history of CrossFit.
Yes.
Where I'm like trying to tell a story, and I'll dress up as Glassman on the camera or something, and
Oh
like,
my gosh.
have you ever watched Drunk History?
Yeah, it's
Dude, they're
hilarious.
amazing.
Yeah.
How funny would one of those be?
That'd be
Let's just
nuts.
keep
On
doing
fit-
other
on
people's
fitness
shows, but making them with cross. We already
Yeah.
we already did between two
Barbells.
ferns.
Yeah, between two barbells
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a huge hit.
With Rich Froning.
Yep. We need
Somewhere
to
on
do
our
more of that.
Facebook. I need to post that to YouTube. Whoops.
I had, after we did that, I had so many ideas of other guests that I would want to do that with and questions I was going to ask them. I need to.
Who's your number one guest you'd want to have on
Dave
between
Castro.
two?
would
Dave
be
Castro, of
fantastic.
course.
He wants
Yeah.
to come
He
on
would
the
be
show.
great.
We'll
Yeah.
get him.
He would be great in that. I wonder if he'd play along.
I think he would.
It'd
We'll
be really
see.
funny.
We'll see.
Yeah.
It was a great time. So.
Well, who the heck is this guy?
Who is this guy?
Right. So let's talk about our special guest here today. Sorry, Aaron. What's up, guys? Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm your host, Mike McGoldick, here with Alex Macklin,
Hey.
CTP behind the camera,
What up?
and our very special guest today,
going
Dr.
on?
Aaron Horschig.
Yep.
Oh, I got
From
it right.
Squat University.
You said
Not
it right.
Squat Therapy.
Yes.
I know. Squat University. Man, we discovered you online. You put out a lot of amazing content.
Thank you.
And have a really big following, and we were very intrigued. So we reached out and did a phone call and a little consultation and thought, man, we've got to interview this guy.
Well, I've been following you for a little while. Yeah.
Dude, I've been following you guys forever. For real. For real. I thought I was, man, it was an honor to be on
time.
Hey, when
Go ahead.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So when I was younger, right, when me and my wife were doing long distance for a little bit of time, I used to drive back and forth from Kansas City to Columbia, right, because she was still going to Mizzou to finish her doctorate. And the whole time I'd be listening to Barbell Shrugged shows.
Oh,
so,
word.
Yeah, for real.
Well, I'm glad to have you on, man.
It's an honor to be on the show.
Yeah, we just.
So go ahead.
Nope.
You guys.
This is our first time. So we just filmed a really cool technique video. You basically running Alex and I through a bunch of hip mobility and ankle screens and kind of picking apart the squat, which I guess you would say is kind of your area of specialties.
For sure.
The company's called Squat University.
Obviously.
Yes.
Give us the background on what brought you to this point.
That's the big thing. So a lot of people at first when they hear Squat University are like, why the heck would you create a brand based on just one movement, right?
I think that's a great idea.
So the biggest thing I tell people is I believe the squat is sort of the building block to finding your body's true strength, right? Now, when we think true strength, right, what do we think of? Now, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, right, he's known for saying this. He goes, no man should have the right, or what does he say? I just messed it up. Exactly. No man should go through life without finding the true strength that they're capable of, right?
I can edit that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to edit that out. So the big thing is, when we think of true strength, right, today in our society, we automatically think to like, someone huge, right, lifting a ton of weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, right, me and my buddies would sit around and watch YouTube videos of Ronnie Coleman.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's throwing
Yeah,
800
buddy.
pounds around. Yeah, screaming,
Yeah,
yeah,
buddy,
buddy. Exactly, right?
Oh, you know that video of him doing what was it, the 700 pound? He's doing it for reps.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I read something that because he recently had some issues, some health issues. I think, he
had a hip issue. I think.
Well, he was like, man, if I died tomorrow, the biggest thing I would be bummed about is the fact that I didn't go for more reps on that 700 pound
Yeah,
squat.
he's nuts. He's throwing around like 200-pound dumbbells like they're toys.
Yeah.
Right, and then you even got Ray Williams squatted 1,005 pounds.
God.
That's nuts. He did it raw, right? So no knee wraps.
Knee sleeves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No squat suit. That's nuts, right? So those guys, there's no denying they're strong, right? That they're very, very strong, and by every means, they are American society, like definition of true strength, right? So that's the big thing is, and today we live in a society that's so performance-based, right, that instantly whenever we think of true strength, we think of lifting big weight. We think of how much we can accomplish, right, and how much we can lift and stuff like that. But what I found is that because we've sort of rearranged our athletic priorities to such an extent to where we think that it's more important how much we lift rather than how well we do it, bad things happen.
It's not
right?
sexy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, the big thing is that, we've definitely become bigger, stronger, faster, right? That's not a bad mantra to live by to a point. But when you get to the point where you're valuing how much you lift over how well you do it to such a great extent, injuries occur, right? You do two things. First, you capsize your potential of what you're possible of doing, and you also invite injuries into the potential picture, right?
Gotcha.
So, every single year there's so many injuries that we see occur in athletes. Now, if we're looking at, right, your basic field athletes like football, baseball, soccer, basketball, right? A lot of those athletes are tearing their ACL at a rate that's nuts, right? 100,000 torn ACLs are happening every single year in the U.S.,
Wow.
right? And the crazy thing about that is 70% of it is non-contact. So no one's even touching those athletes, and they're doing something. They're landing weird, and they're tearing their ACL. Exactly, like change of direction, or they're landing wrong, right?
Gotcha.
And the crazy thing about that too is sort of the scary fact is that girls who compete in a lot of sports like basketball and soccer, they're like 3 times more likely to tear their ACL than
think
boys.
I've read-
your wife did.
Yeah, I think I've read
Yeah.
that. Well, she never tore hers in soccer. She was pretty lucky, but I've read like the percentage of soccer players, female soccer players that tear their ACL. It's crazy. It was crazy high. It's like almost 90% or something.
Yeah, I've heard.
I don't know the exact number, but
basically the stat that I read was if you compete in soccer or basketball year round, right? So that's all already talking about like early sports specialization. You already have a 5% chance of tearing your ACL at some time in your career. That's nuts. right?
Wow.
5% of athletes are already set up to already have this humongous season-ending injury.
Well, that's way different
right?
than 90 that I just threw out there. But that's still pretty
But
high.
it's still a lot, right?
Well, people think that weightlifting is dangerous when you have this kind of statistics. So what's
now
kind of
obviously you're not going to have that huge season-ending injury. You're not going to tear your ACL usually while you're weightlifting, right? But what happens is that you have a lot of these sort of slower chronic injuries that sneak up, right? Knee pain is big with a lot of people, right? And it's all because we've put our performance on such a high level that we don't care how well we're moving, right? Everyone's seen videos of people squatting a new PR and their knees cave in like crazy. And they go, I don't care how bad I squatted. I got this new PR.
Yeah.
Right? And whenever you do that to such an extent, exactly, you're going to limit your potential, right? Because I look at that athlete that's knees are caving in, and I said, hey, if you moved better, right, you can improve your potential performance, right? And you can decrease your injury, right? Because that's a big thing is like strength and conditioning professionals and medical professionals, right? They speak the common language of movement, right? Because quality movement sets the foundation for each of those, right?
Gotcha.
So if you have better quality movement, it gives you the potential to perform better.
Gotcha.
If you have better quality movement, you're not going to get injured as much, usually, right? So when we're speaking from both of those things, right, that's where we come together. And that's what I've tried to give everyone with Squat University, is to come at it from both points of view and be like, hey, I want you to be able to move a lot of weight, but I want you to move well first. And when we come together and do that, that's where everyone.
That's where the magic happens.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So, you've made some really good points, but I want the people listening.
Yeah.
We've talked to you for a couple hours now. The people listening at home still don't know you yet. So, like, where have you learned the things that you've learned, and what's your background, so that these people can know, like, okay, this guy's got some credibility to give me some advice on fixing my squat.
For sure.
Why do people trust you?
For sure. So I did my undergraduate at Truman State University, graduated with an exercise science major. That was 2009. I then went to get my doctorate and graduated from the University of Missouri, right, in 2012. Since then, I've been out in Kansas City working at Boost Physical Therapy and Sports Performance, and I also have a background in Olympic weightlifting. So I don't just come at it from physical therapy.
Yeah, I met you at the American Open.
Exactly.
In person. Well, we've been following each other for a little while, but in person, we met at the American Open last year.
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
So what room number?
So the big thing is I've got over 11 years of experience training and competing in Olympic weightlifting too. I currently train with Anna Martin out in Kansas City at Kansas City Weightlifting is our weightlifting club name. So
I like that because you have that experience coming from an athlete. Because a lot of times people go to physical therapists, and then the physical therapist or somebody is gonna be like, you need to stop doing everything. But you
everything.
But you have that athlete background. Like people don't want to do that.
Exactly.
So,
that's a big thing. When you get an athlete that comes to you and maybe they have an injury or they're moving, poorly enough to where you need to take them back a little bit, it's all based on an individual decision whether or not that person needs to be taken completely out of weightlifting or if they can continue weightlifting, and maybe we just need to add a couple things in to correct their movement, So I always say, we need to train what we need to train and correct for what we need to correct. And for some people, they come to you with knee pain and their movement's so bad, they need to take a step back from weightlifting for a moment until we can correct some things. But for some athletes, they maybe have some small issues. I want you to continue training hard.
Right. You mentioned that earlier, your continuum of technique.
So I always
classify them how?
Yeah. So basically there's 3 levels, right? You've got optimal technique or perfect technique, I guess a lot of people would say. You've got acceptable technique, and then you've got poor technique, right? Now, an easy way to sort of describe which one fits into where, right, is sort of that knee wobble. Right? So ideally, right, the knees need to stay directly in line with your feet whenever you squat, whenever you're doing a clean, whenever you're doing a snatch, right? But what we see is that a lot of times these athletes, their knees will waver in a little bit, right? And I use Kendrick Ferris as an example, right?
Oh, my God.
I know. Right? I think there was a video a couple weeks ago I put up. And his knees, they waver in slightly.
Yeah.
He's moving 270 kilos, something stupid, right?
Yeah.
And his knees waver in slightly. Now, some people look at that and they go valgus. Right, which is a scientific way of saying it's an internal collapse of the knees, right? Now,
some people I think say that don't know what the fuck that is.
They don't know what that is.
They say it makes them feel good about themselves.
Valgus.
Exactly.
Oh, that guy's valgus. Just say his knees are going in. You don't have to be a dick about it.
Basically, it's an internal
collapse. At a seminar.
Exactly. Now, the reason a lot of people first learned of that is because a valgus collapse is what creates a torn ACL. Exactly. So those athletes are going to tear their ACL, right,
Yeah.
when they get a valgus collapse. Now, weightlifting, that's not going to happen most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is that you set your body into a really poor position.
Right.
You're going to sustain a lot of bad forces, and you're going to get some of those chronic overuse injuries.
Why did sorry to stop you there.
Yeah.
Why did Jared Fleming tear his ACL? Did they say why exactly? Was it
his
his
was
ACL?
sort of a freak movement.
I think yeah.
Yeah, it was on the catch.
Uh-huh.
He wasn't very deep in the hole, I don't think.
I
It
think
was on the
like
catch of the
coming
clean.
out, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was on the transition to his jerk is when he
Okay.
did it. It was his knee was almost completely straight.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Sorry.
So that's more of a freak injury.
Yeah.
But you were
Like-
saying Kendricks comes in a little bit.
It come in a
Yep.
little bit, right? So I would say that is acceptable technique, right? His knees aren't ideal, right? But here's the thing: is I'm not going to say, "Hey, Kendrick, you need to go back to a PVC pipe."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's acceptable technique. It's not poor. Now, if those knees collapsed in past the toes, right? That's really poor technique.
Yeah.
And I don't care how elite you are, if you're moving that poorly, you're going to set yourself up for a big injury,
Yeah.
right? So here's the deal. So you have someone with sort of acceptable technique. Then you need to know, well, is it something I need to change, or even can I change it, right? Because Kendrick, right,
Yeah.
he's an elite athlete. He's been in the game for many years. He sort of programmed those motor patterns into his body, right? So I could do all the corrective exercise movement I want. I'm probably not going to change the way he
He's been
squats.
squatting for like 20 years.
Exactly. and it's acceptable, so likely he's not going to set himself up for a big, long-term injury.
Yeah.
Now, if I have an athlete who's 12 years old, right, he's just starting learning weightlifting, and he's showing that little bit of knee wobble, that's probably something, it's acceptable, so I'm still going to let him train. But I'm probably going to have him do some more corrective exercise outside of training to sort of continue the progression of his movement quality.
I think it also too goes along with like what's your ultimate goal? Like
Yeah.
if you're trying to go to a high level and you are capable of going to that high level.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here. Like sometimes people need to figure out and be honest with themselves. Like, look, I'm just doing this for hobby's sake, and there's not a really good chance of me getting to that high level.
Yeah.
You got to think about what your goals are.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's, the big thing is we're making sure, obviously our end goal is to make sure that every athlete can move the best as possible.
Move the best that you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because in doing so, I set them up to do more weight, right? They can lift more weight if they're moving more efficiently, and they're also going to have a decreased rate of injury. So both things come into play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went through earlier. We did so you would start people off by doing like a squat assessment.
Yes.
For people who we have a video that's out, or well, it will be out by the time this episode plays. But what are walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so the first thing that I'm looking for is I want to take people out of their shoes, right? A lot of athletes, especially weightlifters, if you've been in it for a while, you're so used to being in a raised heel weightlifting shoe that as soon as you get out of that weightlifting shoe, you don't know how to squat, right? So as a practitioner where I'm screening someone's body, right, I want to be able to illuminate movement problems that I can then fix, right? So I get people out of their shoes, I get them in their socks or even barefoot like we did, right? And I want to have their toes relatively straight forward, right, like a 5 to 7 degree toe out, right? And I'm going to ask them to squat as deep as possible, right? And the big things I'm looking for is from the ground up. How good is their movement quality?
That was interesting. You said feet straight forward with a 5 to 7 degree toe out. So when people say straight forward now, it might be like if for those watching the video, my feet are like literally straight forward right now. So you're saying even turn out a little bit more, and you would still consider that straightforward?
Yeah. Now here's the nerd side of me coming out. Now that's more than 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a little bit more than 5 degrees.
That's like 10. Okay. There you go. That's a little bit better. Now here's the nerd side of me coming out. Anatomically, your ankle joint is not a sort of like straight 90-degree angle, right? It's actually sort of turned to the side. So anatomical neutral position is like 5 to 7 degrees turned out. Exactly.
Because you see people do this, and they're like, "Well, I'm practicing squatting like this, but my knees feel kind of painful.
Exactly.
Like I get a lot of stress."
Yeah, exactly. So that's the big thing. And also like that,
My hips feel turned in,
everyone's bodies are a little bit different. So there's no ideal setup.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a lot of as coaches, right, we have sort of that, ideal way of coaching, right? Everyone's shoulder width apart, toes relatively straight.
Yeah, there's the basics, there's the fundamentals, and then there's the little bit of differences.
There's a
for
thin line of
individual.
people. Exactly. Some people have hips that are turned out a little bit more. Some people have rotations in their femur,
bow-legged.
right? Exactly. Some people are more bow-legged and stuff like that.
It's not one size fits all.
There's no one size fits all.
Nothing a good personality can't fit.
Exactly. So the big thing though is that when I'm screening the body, I want to see if you can squat toe straight forward, right? And your inability to show good movement quality with the toe straight forward thing may show me that there's some problems in mobility, right? Coordination.
Yeah.
And then we break down the body in sort of a joint by joint approach.
So you believe that everybody pretty much should be able to squat?
Most people.
Okay.
Most people. Now there's definitely people that are going to have those anatomical differences. And then that's sort of the job of the practitioner, the PT, chiro, who's ever working with you to find out if that's your issue.
Gotcha.
Right? Now, here I'll say this. Even though a lot of people, or not, I wouldn't say even a lot of people, even though some people do have an anatomical variation, you should never hinge your inability to squat well only on anatomy. Right? I don't think a lot of us have actually reached the potential to what our mobility can be.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people, so they're like, oh, well, my hips.
Don't use it as a crutch, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah. You know, they'll say, well, I have femoral anteversion, which means that their hips are sort of more angled in. Right?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, that's the reason I can't squat deep. And you look at, you know, a lot of different reasons. You look at their soft tissue pliability, right? They're very stiff, right? And I'm like, hey, you haven't even
That's
tried
not
to
the main
work.
issue,
Exactly. Now, it's definitely something to take into consideration, especially when you have a barbell on your back.
Yeah.
But let's work on your mobility first. And then, obviously, those anatomical variations are going to come into play.
Sure.
Especially when we're talking about your barbell squat. Because that's the thing, too, is when we talk about your body weight squat, right, my goal is to be able to illuminate problems, right, with a foot straight forward screen, right? But whenever you have a barbell on your back, that movement just became more sport specific, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be able to challenge you to basically produce as best as possible. I want you to maximize your current movement capabilities, produce power, produce strength, right? So turning those toes out slightly will allow some people to sort of squat a little bit deeper, keep a more upright chest, and even turning your knees out and your toes out slightly up to 30 degrees will actually involve your adductors a little bit more and will allow you to produce a little bit more torque at the hip. So that's a big thing too, is there's a difference between the straight forward and the toes turned out, and it all comes down to, am I looking at the squat as a movement?
Yeah.
And I want to fix that because I want to allow you the ability to improve your functional mobility as much as possible, because if we can improve that, you're going to set yourself up for much better barbell squat.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I wouldn't always say that the load of your back squat is necessarily a measure of how much better your squat has gotten. Definitely your strength went up, but you may not have improved your mechanics. So there's definitely two ways to look at it.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
So would you say that for a barbell squat, would you aim to have your feet forward, or would you say that?
Yeah. It's really, it all comes down to an individual.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of athletes that can squat toes straight forward in a barbell squat and do very, very well with it.
Yeah.
They're very strong. Their mobility is great. Some athletes need to turn their toes out a little bit more. Everyone's a little bit different. And the barbell back squat, or just whatever barbell squat you're doing, needs to be individual. You need to be comfortable, and you need to be able to move as efficiently as possible.
I feel like, I'm glad you said that, because because I see a lot of times like people are like, well, you should be able to squat with your feet forward, and
Exactly.
it's almost like they're attacking people for doing something. They're doing something wrong.
Exactly.
But, I mean, powerlifters toe out, and I mean, if you're going for a performance base, if it can help you lift more weight, then let's do it.
Now, here's the thing too:
as long as it's structurally acceptable.
Exactly. Now, a lot of people.
What if it was like, well, you should be squatting your feet forward?
Yeah, the Instagram coaches.
Exactly. So that's a big thing too, right? When you turn your toes out, a lot of athletes will then use that as a crutch, right? Well, I can turn my toes out when I squat because I can lift more weight. But they don't think about it, the squat as a movement, right? So you ask them to take their shoes off, and they can't even come close to squatting with their toes straight forward. That's probably the bigger thing that we see, is that athletes can't go backwards. They only think about the barbell squat, right? Because our priorities are performance, right? And whenever we've rearranged those priorities to where it's only about performance and we miss the quality movement, we capsize our potential.
I like what you said earlier when we were filming the video. Like, we don't even think about the squat as an actual functional movement that we should be able to perform.
The squat is first and foremost a movement. And then it's an exercise. And that's the biggest thing is, when you look at, right, people talk about the third world squat. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You should be able, I think Kelly
Talking
started
about like in Asia where people.
The Asian squat.
Dude, my grandmother is Chinese. She could literally sit in the bottom of squat for I don't know how long, because that's just what they did.
My buddy that I work with.
None of that transferred.
Nope, I didn't get any of it. Fucking too much
You didn't
time
get that,
Gene. Yeah, I know. That was just sitting in a chair all day.
My buddy that I work with, that's my co-author on a lot of the blogs that we write, Dr. Kevin Santana. His family's from Laos. Right now, when his mom and his grandma, whenever they're doing a lot of cooking and whatnot, they're sitting in a deep squat. Right? You should be able to sit in a deep squat. I think Dr. Kelly Starrett came out with the 10-minute squat test.
That was day one of the mobility walk.
Exactly. I remember sitting, in grad school, and I'm
sweating.
watching on YouTube, and I'm like, oh man, this is awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, that sort of transformed and sort of exposed, like, man, you should be able to sit in a deep squat.
Sweating
that makes me nervous
doing
just thinking about that, doing a 10-minute squat
Now,
test.
now I tell people you should be able to do 10 minutes, but here's the big thing: I don't think most people should be able to do 10 minutes in a row.
Yeah.
But
Don't jump right
He says
in.
you can break it up.
Exactly,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
at the start. I say you should be able to accumulate 10 minutes throughout the day.
Yeah.
Now, for some people, that's going to be really tough at the start. So I say, hey, try 30 seconds. And even if you need to, grab like a kettlebell and sit in a goblet squat. But eventually, you should be able to where like 2 minutes is nothing for you.
Yeah.
And you can
You know?
counterbalance it with like a slice of pizza or something too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with respect to the pizza.
I'm all about that.
Yeah, but being able to just be in a decent air squat
Exactly.
or body weight squat.
Exactly.
in
And
a
if you
deep squat.
whenever you fully achieve the ability to sit down in a deep squat without any problems, and you can do it for such a long time, man, it's going to change your life. I mean, think about this. 80% of people right now in the world experience back pain at some time in their life, right? Athletes, it's like up to 30% of athletes have back pain, right? And it's crazy, but if you think about it, like when I have athletes come in and I screen them, the one movement across the board that athletes can't do movement-wise is a squat.
with back, the athletes with back pain.
It just, any kind of pain.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really when I came up with the idea for Squat University, because I'd be seeing all these athletes. I'd see, ankle pain, knee pain, hip pain. Torn ACL is one of the biggest things I see. I think I've calculated out with my buddy. It was like over 8,000 hours of contact time with rehabbing athletes who have had a torn ACL. So that's like one of our main specialties at Boost Physical Therapy that we work with. But, I'll have these athletes come in and I'll screen their squats. And the first thing I do is I say, hey, take your shoes off. Let me see your squat. Toe straight forward, squat as deep as possible. Or a single leg squat, right? Because think about this. How many times do you see an athlete come in and maybe they can back squat 700 pounds, right? And maybe their body weight squat looks okay, but then you say, hey, do a single leg squat for me. Right?
And what do you mean, like a pistol?
Now, I don't mean. I think
do you mean
most
like a shrimp squat.
I think most athletes, young athletes who are fairly small. I'm not talking about your 300-pound lineman. You should be able to do a fairly good depth single leg squat, right?
Like a pistol.
Like a pistol squat.
Wow.
Exactly. Now, as you get bigger, my lineman, right? I want you to be able to do an 8-inch box single leg squat. So your depth excursion off an 8-inch box, touch your heel down and come back up. That shows me that you have the coordination, the dynamic knee control to be able to stabilize your body on one foot.
Yeah.
Because the squats also, we got to think about single leg too, right? Because how do athletes tear their ACL? They're not just landing usually on two legs, right?
It's one leg.
It's on one leg, and that's when it
one
goes.
leg plants goes the direction it should not go.
Now, obviously, we're talking more to the CrossFit weightlifting, powerlifting community here, right? Those injuries aren't all at once, right? But the thing I see is we have a lot of this sort of long-term pain. Hey, I've been dealing with some achy knee pain for a while. I got IT band syndrome, right? All those sort of slower things. The first thing I do is say, hey, send me a video, or I want to see your single leg squat. And like 90% of the time, that athlete, their knee moves forward first, right? They're off balance. Their knee maybe, caves in. They don't have the control, for single leg squat. And therein lies your problem, right? The reason we develop pain is because we have a movement problem most of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So by, teaching athletes, right, how to move better on a double and single leg, you change their life, right? Now here's the sort of the analogy I always use, right? When Steve Jobs came out with the Apple I computer back in 1970s, 80s, right? He did so to empower every single person, right, with the ability to do something they never could, right? They had a personal computer in their lives for the first time, right? So it changed the world. Well, my goal with Squat University, obviously it's totally different type of thing, right?
Hold on, Kanye. Are you saying that you're the Steve Jobs of squats?
You would say, I like that idea,
I'm
right?
just kidding.
But my goal is to empower everyone to understand what's possible whenever you learn to move well before you move big weight, right? If you can take control of your body and learn to move better, double and single leg, and so many other avenues, the squat sets the foundation for what you're doing. If you're a football player, right, you need to be able to squat to get down in your defensive ready position.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a baseball player, third baseman, pitcher's getting ready to warm up, what position are they in? A small squat.
Yeah.
Right? Soccer player side to side. Now, obviously, weightlifting and CrossFit, we've got for sure that's a squat, but the squat, the foundation, the movement sets the foundation for everything else.
Yeah.
So if we can do that well and learn how to sort of evaluate your body on a simple term, right? Hey, here's an easy way to fix your ankle mobility.
Yeah.
How's that going to fix the rest of your movement of, quality of movement? Man, it's going to change your life. You're going to see less athletes injured. You're going to see more athletes reach their potential of what they're capable of doing, performance-wise. So it's all come together. Squat University.
Weightlifting and CrossFit, like you don't need to be better in any other movement than the squat.
Exactly.
Like, nothing's more important because you can guarantee
it's the foundational
you are
movement
going
for a lot
to
of
squat a lot in those sports.
Exactly.
Somebody was saying that like you could basically do CrossFit in a phone booth because it's a lot of it's just squatting up and down.
Yeah, it was a physical therapist I spoke to a few weeks ago, and he said that analogy was pretty funny. He's like, everyone knows. We always joke about it at work. Everyone knows you can do CrossFit in a phone booth. Basically, somehow it's like all straight up and down, like nothing lateral, front to back.
Well, and that's the big thing. It was a lot of athletes, right? In CrossFit, it's very single plane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the injuries that occur, retraining that athlete and getting some lateral agility changes everything.
Yeah. Let's take a break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about like debunking some myths.
Let's do it.
About the squat.
Squat
low. Squat deep.
Yep.
Fucking
I think we kind of handled the feet forward one.
Yeah, the feet. Well, let's debunk some myths.
Let's do it.
So it's going to get a little crazy in
a
second.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's talk about like things that we see that are in the world that flare people up about like butt wink and then knees caving in. I want to hear your take on those things. And
so let's talk butt wink, right?
Okay.
$10.
That's awesome.
Like you can get crazy deals, man, if you just look for them the right time.
That's what I need to do.
Are you ready?
We're back.
Are we back?
We're back.
We're back.
Is the red light on? Push record.
Can I edit it?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. Sorry about that. We're back, and now we're going to talk about some of the most.
Wait. Why are you apologizing?
I'm not sorry.
I want to talk about let's
This
debunk.
man just ganked you.
Let's debunk the deep squat. Let's do it. Let's do
That's
it.
my
man.
line.
Let's do it.
Well, I stole it. Let's talk about why. What is your opinion on deep squatting?
Let's do it. So whenever I teach a seminar or whenever I'm teaching, I was teaching at the University of Missouri last year, one of the questions I always ask, I go, raise the hands, right? Who here has heard that deep squats are bad for your knees, right?
I can't believe it's 2016 and we're still having this conversation.
Everyone's hands shoot up, right? Instantly I say, you're wrong. Right, but here's the reason, right? You have to have a why behind everything, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Where did this all start from, right? Well, to actually answer that, we have to go back in history, right?
Way back into time.
History 101, squat history 101. 1950s, right, down in Texas. There's a doctor by the name of Dr. Carl Klein, right? And he's working at a university where there's a lot of football players who are injuring their knees, right? Torn ACLs, torn MCLs, right? And he's wondering, he goes, I wonder why there's such a high increase of these knee injuries in football players. And he postulated, hey, it's probably because they train with deep squats, right? Because we've been squatting deep since the later 1800s, right? When that first started coming over to America, people started squatting deep, right? You see Paul Anderson right at that time. So we started squatting deep, and he thought that the reason behind these high rate of knee injuries was due to the deep squat, okay? So he made this sort of self-made device, and he took all these football players in, and he measured the laxity in their knees, so how much motion they could have in their knees, right? Yeah. And he compared it to people who either never squatted or only squatted to parallel, okay? And he found that these athletes had more laxity in their knees, okay? So their knees were...
The deep squatters.
The deep squatters had more laxity in their knees, okay? So based on that...
Sorry, what do you mean by laxity?
So basically, so in your knee, right, you have, when you're relaxed completely, your ligaments inside your knee control how much stability your knee has. So there's shear force, right, that goes forward and backwards, right? So when you're testing your ACL, if you have more laxity, your knee can move forward and backwards on it. That's a tibia and the femur on top of each other, right? So we found that they had more laxity in the MCL and the ACL, right? So the big thing, so he published this, right? In 1961, he came out with the findings, and his theory was that deep squats caused more laxity in the knees. They were more unstable, and therefore setting these football players up for more of an injury, right? That's why they were tearing their ACL. So that was 1961, right? 1962, Sports Illustrated picked it up and had an article on it, right?
Yeah.
And that just spread across the world, right?
Isn't that funny how that works?
Yeah.
Like, it's just one thing. And just
put it in the right hands.
Yeah, put it in the right hands, it becomes gospel.
Exactly. Well, because here's the big thing, right? At first, he published it in what? A medical journal, right? Now, unless you're a big nerd like myself, you're not really reading many medical journals, right? Sports Illustrated, everyone reads it,
Well, it went
right?
viral because it was a swimsuit edition, wasn't it?
Oh, it definitely was. I don't know how nice the swimsuits were back in 1961.
That's how it blew up like wildfire.
I heard it was a hot issue.
It was the one. It was the one pieces.
It was a hot one piece, man. So it went viral basically, right? So then right after that, right, 1963, 1965, the AMA, American Medical Association, came out with a position statement that cautioned against the use of deep squats.
Wow.
Right? Exactly.
I didn't know this. This is crazy.
The military stopped using the squat jumper. It was like a dynamic movement that you squatted deep, jumped up, right? They stopped using that, right?
Yeah.
Even a superintendent in New York, I think it was New York City, or
your knees out.
they cautioned against. They said, hey, no more physical education classes should do deep squats. Right? So already you had a bunch of people across the entire U.S. and then spread against the world, right, that said, hey, deep squatting is bad for your knees. You're going to tear your ACLs or set yourself up to tear your ACL. Now, there were some people that came out and they said, hey, this is bogus, right?
Yeah.
I think it's Dr. John Paulskamp. I think that's how you say his last name. He was a writer for Strength and Health, I think, or Strength and Muscle back at the time, a pretty popular issue. He was like, hey, this is bogus. You shouldn't, not deep squat based on this fear, right, that you maybe tear your ACL, right? But I mean,
all the cool kids.
Well, but you know what,
parallel.
too? People aren't going to protest it because that's like saying, "Hey, you don't have to eat vegetables anymore."
Exactly.
Everybody's like, "Well, if they say so, science is science." I'm like,
the damage had been done, right? The damage had been done.
That's
right?
a great analogy.
That is a great analogy.
I mean, I'll be honest, like no one loves going. I mean, I'm natural to it now. Like, but when I started squatting, it was like I remember it being a chore to go as low as I could.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
People don't like to work hard, right?
It's harder.
Yeah. So
so
that's the 1960s, right? So after that, you have
50 years later.
You have decades of people that stopped squatting, right, because of this fear, right?
Did you find out though that these people actually were like manufacturing benches for bench pressing?
Exactly.
Like it's all just a big conspiracy?
That's where how much you bench, man. That's where it all
Who
started.
made this?
That's where it started.
Dr. Skip Leg Day.
Dr. Smith machine.
Exactly. That's Dr. Carl Klein's new nickname. Dr. Skip Leg Day.
Dr. Skip Leg Day.
I like that. So, all right. So let's think about it right now, right? Anatomical wise,
what's going on in deep squat?
What happens when you deep squat, right? So there's two different forces, big forces that we look at during the knee, right? You have shear force, right? So you got your tibia down here, your femur up here, and the shear force
sliding,
is the sliding. So your PCL and your ACL are two ligaments deep inside your knee, right? And they oppose this force. Now, they're not the only thing because you got a bunch of muscles around there that also pull and create that stability. But those two ligaments are the big ones that we know about that shear force affects. That's how you tear your ACL, is there's a really large amount of shear force, right? Now, that shear force only increases for the ACL. It's at its highest at about 15 to 30 degrees in knee flexion. Right, so that's
just the start of the squat.
About a 4-inch squat. Oh. Right, so most people don't tear their ACL in a deep squat.
So all that high-ass squatting, you're actually it's counterproductive.
Exactly. So your ACL is put on max load at about a 4-inch depth squat for most people. Right, it's a very shallow squat. Now, but here's the thing: is there's also compression. Okay. Right now, compression is the two forces that smash things together.
Yep.
Right? Now you have your meniscus right in between there, right? That's sort of your bumper plates, right?
Yep.
For your knee. You also have compressive forces of your patella, right? Your kneecap pressing back too. So there's a lot of different compressive forces. Now, what we find is that there's an inverse relationship with compression and shear force. So the deeper you squat, the more compression there is.
Yep.
The less shear force there is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the bottom of the squat would be the easiest on the knees.
Exactly. So the deeper you squat, the less force is placed on your PCL and ACL.
Right. Given you're squatting with acceptable
with
technique.
good technique.
Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
That's the big thing is good technique.
That's the caveat,
right? Exactly. So that's the big thing. So the deeper you squat, your ACL and PCL. PCL is loaded at about 90 degrees, so a little bit deeper. But even then, it's not anywhere close to the amount of force that could tear your ACL. There's been research done on this force, right? And they've actually taken measurements, and the highest force ever recorded on the ACL during a squat was only 25% of its max tensile strength, which means it's not even anywhere close to tear the
ways
ACL.
to go, for any damage.
Exactly.
To be done.
And it's because you have so much compression whenever you're squatting with weight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And what are the benefits of deep squatting? Because let's get that out there. Like,
exactly.
Why should you squat deep?
There's so many benefits to deep squatting. A, you're going to be able to use your muscles functionally through a full range of motion, right? So that's a big thing. Is
the muscles of the glutes, hams,
everything,
quads,
entire lower body. You're using your trunk muscles. That's a big thing too, right? Because squatting, we call it leg day, right? But how much are you using your core?
Yeah, squat is a full body movement.
It's a full body movement.
Everything
is
going on.
Exactly. So back to the myth, right? So we know what our two anatomical forces are and how it doesn't put a lot of pressure on it. So what did the research say, right? Because all we have is Dr. Carl Klein's research, right?
Yeah.
Well, couple decades later, there was a group of researchers that tried to replicate that original study, right? Because if anyone knows anything about science, is you can't just base.
You gotta replicate it.
Exactly.
You gotta validate it.
Exactly.
That's what the problem is. They get one fucking study.
Exactly.
And it's like this is the way it is.
Exactly. So they actually made almost the exact same sort of crude self-made device that Klein had, right?
Uh-huh.
And they did almost the exact same study, found the exact opposite results, right? The weightlifters and people who squatted deep had almost the exact same knee stability, if not a little bit better, than the athletes who squatted only to parallel, right? Okay, skip forward, 1986, right? There's another group of researchers. It's a great year, man. I was born in the too, right? There we go. There we go.
86.
I think it was
me too.
Right. All right. So they took a group of researchers and they took weightlifters, right? They said go do heavy squats for an hour, right?
Yeah.
They took basketball players. They said go practice for an hour. They took some runners. They said go run a 10-kilometer distance, right? And when they came back, they all tested their knee stability again, right? The weightlifters had the more stable knees after all that time than either the basketball players or the runners, right? Year after, another group of people came out, and they tested weightlifters and powerlifters who squatted ass to grass really deep, right? And they compared it to people again who squatted just to parallel. And they found that the weightlifters and powerlifters who squatted really deep actually had more stable knees, so less laxity in their knee ligaments, right? So what we find is that the deep squat actually has a protective effect on the knees, right, as far as the stability goes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about a football player, right? Talking about a basketball player, right?
Changing direction all the time.
And they're at such a high rate, like we already talked about. 70% of those 100,000 ACL tears in the U.S. alone are non-contact, right? You get that athlete to know how to squat deep, right, with weight on their back, with good technique, you're already teaching them how to be able to be more safer, right? To be able to move with better quality movement and decrease their risk of injury.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's a big thing, right? And that was, 1980s, right, that we're already learning that. So that's a huge thing right there. Right.
Should everybody squat deep?
Well, that's a big thing too, right? Because obviously this Dr. Carl Klein, right, he was coming out, he was talking about knee instability as far as laxity, right, and the ligaments.
Yeah, no, this
That
flies. This flies.
It's all over
your
all over
ass,
the place.
You showered?
Probably smell right now. So here's the big thing, right? Theoretically, can deep squats be bad for you?
He's back. He's back.
I got it.
Okay,
All
sorry.
right,
Theoretically, deep squats.
Theoretically, deep squats could be bad to a point because of compression. Right? Now, we talked about how the deeper you squat, the more compressive forces that are placed on the knee. The more weight you're holding on your back, the more compressive forces, right?
Yeah.
You know, weightlifters, elite weightlifters and bodybuilders and, powerlifters, they've seen, where you're going to sustain forces at your knee like 6-8 times your body weight. So there's a lot of compressive force. Now, if you maintain a very high, intense level of squatting for such a long time, eventually that compression can start wearing away the cartilage, right? So your meniscus theoretically could start wearing away. The cartilage on the backside of your patella, right, could start wearing away because you're having such high increased amounts of compressive forces. Now, here's the deal. Research has also looked at, do weightlifters get arthritis like crazy, right? Most of them, right? Because if you think about it, if you're squatting on such a daily basis, you're performing Olympic weightlifting movements every single day, right? Weightlifters should have horrible arthritis in their knees, right? Not so. And the reason for that is because we have good programming. Right? You can't max out every single day and keep your knees, basically. Right? You have to be smart. Now, if you look at good training programming, right, it's not just max out every single day. Maybe when you're younger, you can increase your weight.
Depends on what training program you're doing. But
Exactly. But most training, right, you have a fluctuation.
Yes.
Right? You vary the intensity in your volume, right? And what that does is it allows your body to recover from those heavy compressive forces, right? It allows your knees to breathe, right? It's a simple way of saying it. So squatting deep is only bad for your knees if you're going heavy every single day. And it's not going to be a one-time thing, but it's going to be slowly over time. You could slowly degrade your cartilage, your meniscus, and whatnot because you're not allowing your body to recover well.
Yeah, it's tough. That's tough mentally because, I'll even, as myself an example, I'll notice like when I have some heavy squatting volume for a couple of weeks, my patellar tendons start to act up a little bit, and I get some pain under the kneecap, and it's just a sign that all right, it's probably time for me to back off on the squatting volume just a little bit. Because my knees aren't always on the same plan that I have written out for me. The plan doesn't dictate how my knees feel. Like, it's just sometimes you got to change it, and you got to listen to that a little
Your
bit.
plan should always be individual to you. That's the one thing that's so tough is you can't just recommend just a basic program for every single person because everyone's got different needs.
You're going to adapt differently.
Everyone requires a certain amount of intensity.
Everyone should not do small off.
Yes,
100%.
That is true.
100%. Exactly. That's a really tough plan. So if you're not recovering right, man, you're just asking for injury.
But going back to your point, though, of like what you're talking about movement quality, like if you're trying to do all this high volume squatting, but you're not really moving all that great, well, that's maybe more of the culprit. The fact that your body is not, your knees aren't up to it.
Exactly. So you got two things you got to look at whenever you're squatting barbell: the quality of your movement, and then your programming too, right? So if your quality of your movement's not on, right, you're going to have a lot of forces placed on your body. Eventually, it's going to lead to an overuse movement injury much quicker, right?
Yeah.
Also, you got to look at that, your the amount of weight that you're lifting, right?
Yeah.
Your performance training program, right?
I was just going to say, like, most people, when you have questions about some kind of a knee pain or a squat pain, whatever, they always assume or ask you a movement question first, which is important. But most of the time, too, I just want to be like, well, let me look at your volume. Because you could be not doing anything wrong, and you think you're doing something wrong because your knees hurt. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. You're just overdoing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is a lot of people, when we think of training, right, we only think of the training program, right? We think of how much weight I'm lifting, the volume, the intensity, and we don't think about recovery, right?
Yeah.
Recovery is just as important at the amount of weight that you're lifting, right? And if you're not recovering right, you're not allowing your body to actually make that compensation to improve your strength, improve your power, right? So it's, you got people not eating right, not sleeping right, not drinking enough water, right? And they're jumping straight to different high-tech.
More hip mobility isn't going to help.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to get your basics down first.
Yeah,
for sure.
So we talked about the deep squatting myth. I want to talk a little bit about that. Kind of leads into like some knee pain and some common things. So like first thing that comes to mind for me is like knees cracking. Yeah. You talked about eventually like weightlifters, because of the squatting volume, maybe having arthritis, like my knees pop. Like, is this a bad thing? People ask me all the time about that.
Yeah,
like,
and a
why
lot
does
of
this
times
happen, and what's the deal?
When I see people whose knees pop, a lot of times their quads are so excessively stiff, right? So it's adding a lot of compression, right, on the back of that patella, right? Because we talked about there's more than one way that our body sustains compression, and on the back of the patella, right, it's a big area. So when you're getting that popping, a lot of times it's actually structures rubbing on each other and creating a little bit of that popping.
Gotcha.
Now, a reason for that for a lot of people, right, why did those quads become so excessively stiff? And a lot of times it comes down to the quality of their movement when they're back squatting, right, or when they're front squatting, right? So the big thing is, that the knees over the toes. Yeah. Right? Now, here's the thing, right? Originally, a lot of people thought, the knee should never pass the toes, right? And because, the person who actually developed that cue, who was it? It's probably someone who's probably well-intentioned, like PT, chiro, or, medical doctor. And they had a kid come to him, and, they said, hey, my knees are hurting. They watched their squat, and their knees move excessively forward.
What's the doctor's name that did the study on not squatting below parallel?
Dr. Carl Klein.
I think it was his brother.
It's Bob Klein. Bob Klein. Exactly. So this athlete's got some knee pain, right? So a person, you instantly give them a cue, and you say, hey, don't let your knees, come forward. And instantly they move with a big hip hinge, right? And eventually their knee pain goes away. So they go, aha, there you go, right? Knee should never go forward, right? But actually what we find out is that you're only treating the symptom. The big problem, the original problem, the reason why they had that knee pain is because of a balance issue, right? So when an athlete moves poorly, right, they usually move from the knees first, right? Their ankles,
which some people teach that, especially,
some people do.
Weightlifting, in the weightlifting world, the knee break squat.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm not disagreeing, maybe kind of am. I think it's confused with knees and hips moving at the same time.
And here's the big thing
with that. Because that's not the same
yeah.
as like knees first. Yeah. Like knees and hips simultaneous is different from hips back first.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
For sure. Because here's the deal. When I say hips first, I don't mean only hip movement, right? Yeah. The knees are going to bend. They're just not going to go forward first, right? Because when an athlete moves poorly, right, and they break their knees forward first, right, instantly their body weight shifts towards their toes a little bit, right? So they become off balance. They're having a lot of shear force placed on their knee. So eventually it can lead to pain, right? So by cueing that athlete to push their hips back, right, and blocking their knees, they're correcting for the symptom of the knee moving forward. But what you're actually teaching the athlete in the end is how to balance, right? So by engaging those hips a little bit first, you're teaching the athlete to keep their center of gravity over the middle of their foot where it was going towards their toes, right? Now, here's the deal. In order to get into a deep squat position, those knees have to come forward.
Yeah.
Right? You can't.
Especially with a high bar.
Exactly, right?
If you're doing a high bar squat.
You can't do any of the Olympic type of squats, right? Front
Yeah.
squat, overhead squat, high bar squat with only keeping your knees, from going past your toes. They have to go forward in order for your hips to drop to the deepest position.
That's why weightlifting shoes are so useful.
Exactly.
Because they allow you to get a little bit more range of motion in the ankles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even the only time I think I've seen where someone's knees aren't really far forward over the toes is when their hips are super mobile and their feet are actually very wide.
Exactly.
And they're actually able to get their hips between their feet.
Exactly.
Which is very rare.
Yeah. I mean, for example, Chad Vaughn has a squat to where his feet are wide.
His picture is epic.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Not everyone's got that great of mobility.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's able to have his
snatch, I think.
Yeah,
I
I'm
can't
sure.
remember what year, but
just Google
maybe the
Chad Vaughn
Olympics.
snatch.
I think it was at the Olympics.
It probably was.
Yeah, it's one of the most common pictures
I've
you see
seen-
him
yeah,
in.
I've seen it, yeah.
He is low,
Yeah.
and his
very low.
hips are literally like next to his ankles.
He's got awesome technique.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the squat, though, like we were talking about earlier, the
Yeah.
assessment, it starts, at the ankle, and then you move up to the hips. So
Yep.
those two things have to be
Exactly. And here's the big thing with the squat is all about the knees are a hinge joint only, right? So the knees will go based on where the ankles and hips let them go.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of times we get so hung up on the knee that we forget about the ankles and hips, right? As long as the hips engage first, don't worry about your knees. Let them go and stay balanced. Because some athletes will need to let their knees go real far forward.
Yeah.
Some athletes don't need to. But as long as your hips engage first, you keep your knees safe, you limit premature forward movement of the knees, all you have to do is stay balanced. Your knees will be safe.
And I want to clarify this too. Like, when you mean by hips first, like we're not talking about like straight up doing like this dropping your chest thing.
Exactly.
It's just a little bit. I think people take it. They hear a cue.
Yeah.
This always happens. I mean, like heels or whatever. They hear a cue and they take it to 11.
Exactly.
When in actuality, it's just a slight overcorrection so you can get a person actually moving the way you want them to move.
100%. And here's the deal: is based on the type of squat you're doing is gonna base the amount of hip hinge on that. Now, body weight squat, right? Everyone's center of gravity is a little bit different based on their anatomy. Most people, it's right around the middle of their stomach, right? So you're gonna have a bigger hip hinge during a body weight squat than you would a front squat, right? So the amount of hip hinge on a front squat is gonna be so small. But it still has to happen because if not, then you're moving your knees forward first, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to be off balance, and you're going to put a lot of harmful forces on your knee.
Yeah.
So
when
the
you were
amount
talking
of
about
hip
the balance, it'd be the 3 points of contact on your foot. So like
Exactly.
your whole foot should be planted
Glued to the ground.
glued to the floor.
Exactly.
Yeah, when you did that screen on us earlier, you had us take our shoes and socks off, and you looked at
Exactly.
you spent a lot of time actually looking at our feet, which I've never had someone do. I've had some people kind of look at it, and maybe they haven't spent a lot of time because I don't have any collapse. But, but with Alex, it's a little different.
Yeah.
And you spent a lot of time assessing his foot and his mechanics.
But people don't think the feet have anything
People
to do.
don't look
but
at it.
that's where you're connected to the ground. That's where
Exactly.
you're gonna put force into the ground.
Exactly.
Your
I would
feet.
say your foot is like your body's base to its house of cards, right? If your foot stability's off, you're never going to be able to produce the most amount of efficient movement on top of it. Your technique's always going to be off, right? So when we look at the foot, right, I like to use the analogy of a tripod, right? You got the base of your heel, the base of your first toe, base of your fifth toe, and when it's all down in equal contact, right, it brings your foot into a good arched position. Now, if you have an excessively flat foot due to an anatomical sort of difference.
Yeah, some people are born with it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're not probably going to be able to get your foot into an arch, but you can still stay balanced, right? The biggest thing is what happens is that whenever people's feet fall in and they collapse over,
or they go to flare out,
or they go
too
too
like,
wide.
knees out,
Right,
like
right.
The whole inner foot just goes off the ground.
We talked about that. We see that a lot.
Exactly.
Everyone knows that knees out is really good, so you see people really overdo it. And like even right here, I kind of do it when I stand sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, oh, my toes are off the ground. I'm like, I'm not balanced.
Exactly. That's the big thing. The cue knees out only works to a point.
I used to do that on my pulls.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would like really drive the knees out, and like my big toes would come off the ground. And finally, someone one day was like, that's not really good.
Exactly. Because what
happens
happens
was that Doug? That was probably
it was probably like 6 people. But.
Yeah.
if you drive your knees too far wide, you just become unstable in the opposite direction, right? Because your foot rolls on the outside.
Yeah.
So the cue, drive the knees wide, only works to a point. It's great at aligning and realigning your knees with your toes if your knees cave in. But if you drive them too far wide, your foot just becomes unstable in the opposite direction. And when your foot's unstable, your potential to perform good quality movement and produce good force dramatically decreases.
Can't do it.
So it's all about being stable from the bottom up.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Let's back up for a second. You talked about, or I brought up the knees popping, and you said it's kind of it's an imbalance. Maybe the quads are overdeveloped or too tight. Like, what would cause that? You said just maybe too much knee dominant squatting.
A lot of times it's because you're excessively using your quads as far as your knees are moving too far forward first, right? So what can we do, right? We recorrect movement. Right.
Okay.
So the first thing I'm going to get you, I'm going to screen your body from head to toe, right? We found some hip issues, right, as far as your mobility earlier.
Yeah.
But, foam rolling the quads, stretching the quads a little bit can help decrease a lot of that tension, right? And then recorrecting movement, right? So you have to come at it from both sides. It's not just mobility work.
Yeah.
It's also coordination.
Yeah.
And when you get those two together, man, you can see dramatic changes.
Are there any corrective exercises that you would put in place that would help with that?
Well, like I said, so the big things are going to be, foam rolling the quads and stretching the quads. But corrective exercise, I love a touchdown squat. Okay,
What's a touchdown squat?
A touchdown squat
Maybe we should film a video about this.
Yeah, we'll have to show. Yeah, so basically all you're doing is from the side is you're going to get on a small box. I'm talking like 2 inches for a lot of people, right? And they pick their foot up, right? And all they do is they push their butt back, right? They engage their posterior chain. And all they do is they tap and back up.
Oh,
okay. So basically, they're doing like the smallest single leg
It's like you're doing a dance a little bit.
Exactly. I bring that to the club and it goes. People go crazy for that. Exactly. So don't throw your foot back, but just put it right behind your side. Yeah.
I'm gonna go open this club and do the touchdown.
So it's all about right. So you're pushing your butt back and bringing your chest forward. Right, if you do 20 of those in a row right now, your butt muscles are going to be on fire.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to feel is my glutes light up.
Exactly. We're recorrecting for that coordination issue.
Okay.
Right, we're getting those glutes to turn on at first, and it's taking pressure off the knees. So this is something, man, I'll have people 1 week post-op after their ACL reconstruction, they're doing this.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I've got grandma who had a total knee. She's eventually going to get to doing that.
Touchdown squat?
A touchdown squat. Now,
Nice.
the height of it's going to be based on a lot of things, right? But like I said, every single person should be able to at least do one off an 8-inch box or an 8-inch height.
So you said this was good for glute activation?
Huge.
Yeah, because I get a lot of questions like, why my glutes? How do I turn on my glutes? How do I get my glutes to fire?
Movement, right? That's the biggest thing. Now, because a lot of times you'll try to do it in isolation, right? Now, you can do like a bridge, right, or like a glute bridge, right, where you're laying on your back and picking your hips up.
Or hip thrust or something.
And that's fine, right? But is that necessarily going to translate over to movement? Is it going to translate over to better quality movement, right?
Yeah.
Because just because you can get the glutes to turn on in one movement doesn't necessarily mean you can get them to turn on in another movement.
Yeah,
so we need to make sure that our quality of movement is very, very good in a number of different ways, right?
Yeah.
In a lunge, in a squat. But I think the squat sort of set, like we talked about, sets the foundation for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
If you can't squat right, you're not going to be able to jump right. You're not be able to clean right?
Yeah.
So there's so many different movements that can be extrapolated from one movement.
Got it.
That's why it's the king of the lifts, man.
Exactly. It's the king of all lifts.
It's the king of all lifts.
Exactly.
Squat.
What others were there?
What?
Myths.
Myths.
Yeah.
Well, like butt wink. Like
yeah.
Let's talk about
the famous hip wink.
Let's talk about butt wink.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
prefer
here's
the word hip. I don't want to offend anyone.
So what is butt wink? Okay, now butt wink specifically talks about a posterior pelvic tilt of your hips as you go into a deep squat. So someone's standing right here. As they go down and they hit a certain part of their depth, their hips are essentially pulled under their body. So that's the winking motion that a lot of people see.
The booty goes.
Exactly, their booty goes, right? Now, a lot of people instantly look at this and they go, man, that is horrible for your back, right?
Internet coaches.
Internet coaches, for sure.
How do they say it online?
Your lower back. You're gonna bulge a disc, a herniated disc. If you keep squatting like that.
Exactly. Now let's look at it from an anatomical standpoint, right?
All right.
So theoretically, what could it do? If the butt wink is to an excessive amount, right? Those hips are pulled under because of the relationship with the pelvis and the low back, right? The back is going to flex automatically. Now, when you are doing a bodyweight squat, right, and you go all the way down and your back is rounded a little bit, is it the biggest problem? No. Right? Unless you're doing like 500 bodyweight squats in a row, if you sit in a deep squat and your back's a little rounded, there's not a ton of force going down through your spine that's going to cause a disc bulge. So for a healthy athlete sitting in the deep squat with a butt wink, there's no problem to it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're already healthy, and just a little bit of that movement, it's not going to have a lot of harmful forces on your back. When does it become a problem, right? Now, if I have a barbell on my back and I'm trying to squat and that butt wink is excessive to where I'm losing my spinal stability, right, and my back is rounding, then you have a ton of forces coming down through your spine.
Right.
It's not in its natural position, right? It's flexed. Because of those forces coming down, it can create over time, right, with a number of sets, a number of repetitions, it can create a herniated disc, right? So basically, if you look at like a jelly donut, a lot of people don't like this analogy. I think it's really simple. Jelly donut, right?
Why would they not like this?
You're talking about the disc.
The disc, right? Because
Because
basically,
that's a
your
really good analogy.
your disc isn't a jelly donut. Yeah, I understand from a anatomical standpoint. It's an analogy, right? If you smash a jelly donut, it's going to come out the back, right?
Yeah.
So when there's this part of your disc, right, that whenever you have a herniated disc, it protrudes out the back.
Nucleus, right?
The nucleus, the annulus. It's going to come
nucleus,
out, and it's going to impinge on a nerve. Eventually. So that's why people who have a disc bulge have that pain that radiates down their legs.
The sciatic nerve.
Exactly. Yeah. So it all comes from that disc herniation, right?
Gotcha.
So whenever you have excessive pelvic tilt, right, and you're lifting with the barbell on your back, theoretically you could set yourself up for a herniated disc over time. Okay? Now here's the deal. The big thing when you're looking at an athlete who has butt wink, is you got to look at when does it occur and is it excessive? Yeah. Right? If it occurs during the midway part of their squat, it's probably going to be excessive.
It's not a mobility issue.
Exactly. That's probably it's more likely an anatomical issue, right?
Okay.
So basically their femurs hit their end range in the hip socket, and in order to get any deeper, basically the pelvis is turned under. Now some people get a pinching sensation or an impingement in their hips. Some people won't, and their pelvis will just naturally move excessively, right? So if it occurs early on in the squat and it causes a lot of excessive movement in the pelvis, it's not a good thing at all.
Yeah.
Right? But if it occurs at the very bottom of the squat, right, it's probably not as big of a deal as many people have made it out to be for a healthy athlete without a history of back pain. That's the big thing too, right? You have to take into an athlete's
injury history. Account all the history.
If I've got an athlete who's got a history of injury to their back, they've got a couple bulging discs, and I see that their back is actually going into excessive flexion at the bottom, I'm not going to have that athlete squat a ton, because they're putting themselves in a bad position every single time.
Gotcha.
Right? So it's all about when does it occur and how excessive is it? Because here's the big thing. I think a lot of people have overblown that a butt wink is automatically the worst thing in the world. For a healthy athlete, if it only occurs at the very bottom of the squat and it only occurs to a small amount, I don't believe, in my opinion, that it's as big of a deal as many people have made it out to be. Okay? Now
Thank you, doctor.
Now, here's the big thing. If an athlete has an injury history, we got to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
If it's excessive, we got to take it into consideration. But also, here's the thing. Can we change it? That's everyone's question, right? Can we change the amount of butt wink? Well, if it's an anatomical issue that's creating it, which a lot of people think that's a big reason, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I can't necessarily change how your bones are formed at your hip, right?
Not with that attitude.
Exactly. I'll try. Maybe next year if I keep on working hard at it.
Yeah.
But, I can't change your anatomy.
Sure.
But to the point, I don't think many people have hit their potential of mobility.
Yeah.
As we talked about earlier, a lot of people say, "Well, it's my anatomy." Well, have you really reached your mobility end range?
Yeah.
Because I think
that's just
people,
like a lazy excuse. Like, well,
exactly.
Have you welcomed Ramwad for 6 weeks yet?
Exactly. And so that's the thing is, a lot of times when we see stiff ankles definitely can cause some butt wink. Because what happens is that as you squat deeper, right?
Yeah.
Your knees need to be able to go over your toes, right, to be able to squat to the deepest position. Well, if you have a block in that ankle and your knees can't go any farther forward,
the body has to compensate.
You have to compensate.
Right.
So that pelvis is going to be pulled under the body a little bit more, right? So by improving ankle mobility and allowing that knee to go further over the toe, you're going to allow your body to keep that neutral spinal alignment, and the pelvis is going to stay in place a little bit longer to squat deeper with maintaining a more upright chest.
Yeah. Okay.
We did a lot of ankle mobility. You showed us a few things, the ankle mobility in the video that we did.
And the hip mobility.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, okay, so what about, let's say that the hip and ankle mobility are fine. Let's say that it's not an anatomical. Somebody do it for me. Issue.
Yes.
That it's a control issue, meaning like a coordination. Like, what do you do? What are some fixes that you recommend?
So definitely, you got to look at the athlete. You got to break it down and see is their body weight squat quality first off, right? Because if their body weight squat's not very good quality.
You mean like an air squat?
An air squat, yeah. I'm not going to have them load up the bar yet, right? They got to be able to show me good quality movement with a body weight squat first, right? Movement predicates your barbell movements, right? So we got them, moving well, body weight squat. And then we slowly work up from a barbell training perspective. Can they maintain, we call it postural integrity, right? Can they maintain balance? Is their spine, are they able to maintain it? Now, I don't know how much of an extent of core stability plays in to posterior pelvic tilt, right? But it probably, to some point has some control, right? Because if you lose your spinal stability, right, you're going to excessively flex at the spine, right? So breathing is a big thing.
You mean core stability? Yeah.
Core stability, exactly. So here's the big thing with barbell training, right? You have to learn how to breathe right, right? Because it's not just about bracing. You have to also take into account and harness the power of your breath, right? So by breathing into your stomach and then bracing over the top, right? We talked about this earlier. You increase your body's natural intra-abdominal cavity pressure, and that stabilizes your spine like crazy, right? So it's going to allow you to maintain spinal stability and core stability, right, throughout the entire lift a lot more if you're able to breathe and then brace well.
Yeah, people miss that boat a lot. They'll sit there and get set up on a bar, or not even set up on a bar, and then with the load try to breathe. And you've got to get set up before you go to the bar.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Push that air. Get that
into
air
the stomach.
Into the stomach.
Exactly. Because a lot of people, when they take a breath, right, and they get onto the barbell, right, and they take that big breath, their chest rises, right? They call them a chest breather, right? Now, when you're doing that, you're not effectively using your diaphragm.
Yeah.
And when you breathe,
stick that belly out. It ain't gonna look good.
When you breathe into your stomach, right, you allow your diaphragm to descend, and you're going to increase your intra-abdominal cavity pressure when you brace on top of it, right? Yeah. Now, here's the thing: is you can't overcompensate with your back whenever you do that, right? A lot of people, they start belly breathing, and they instantly. They push their stomach out, and then they lose their spinal stability. They're overextended, right? Because that's just a bad issue as well, right? Because there's a lot of issues with hyperextension of the back as well whenever we're doing a lot of our barbell movements. Yeah. So we want to make sure that our back's in a nice flat position.
When would you tell a person – sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
When would you tell a person not to squat deep?
When would I tell them not to squat deep? It would be that they have an injury history or they cannot maintain good technique. Yeah. So that's a big thing. So, I mean – I always say everyone should have the ability to squat ass to grass, right? Well, if you can't get down there without pain, that's not right for you. Yeah. You should never push into pain, right? That's a big thing. In today's society, we're all about no pain, no gain.
Pain is the weakness leaving the body.
I mean,
you told me to adapt and
exactly.
Adapt or die.
Stress the system.
I saw an Advil commercial. I think it was Advil the other day, and it was Shaq on it, and he was like, "Hey, you can get the same treatment as a physical therapist by putting this patch on your back in what back pain?" You know, and I'm like, well, first off, I don't put patches on people and just tell them they're good.
you don't do the cupping a little bit. The cupping.
I have seen some people do some cupping, but that's not the only thing that physical therapy does, right? But you should never try to cover up your pain. Pain's a natural part of an inflammatory process. There's a reason you have pain. Yeah. Right? Now, Gray Cook, right? He's a pretty famous physical therapist. He wrote the book Movement. He came up with the FMS screening, right? Yep. He always uses the analogy that pain is like a warning light in your car, right? And if you just cover up that warning light, you're eventually going to run your car into a problem, right? Because you can only drive your car, pedal to the metal for so long with that warning light on. Eventually, something bad's going to happen. Well, athletes today, right? How many people do you go into the gym and you see them taking ibuprofen before they train? You see them using a ton of different creams. They have to wrap their body up in order to squat or do their training pain-free. Now,
the rock tape mummy.
You said the word athletes. I don't even mean athletes.
Yeah. In general.
Yeah, in general. Yeah. Regular people going to the gym to get healthier. Exactly. You shouldn't be popping down ibuprofen.
Pain is there for a reason. You need to understand why it's there, right? And now let's talk about, if we go back to an athlete though, right? There's going to be a time when you have to push through pain. Like I'm not the first person to say, hey, let's shy away from competition, right? Yeah. If it's competition time, as an athlete, there's going to be times where you have to push through pain. But if it's through the training process every single day, things are going to go bad for you. Yeah. You have to understand what pain is and address it and not just cover it up. Yeah. Right? So that's a big thing. So if someone's having pain, I'm not going to have them, push their barbell movements. Now,
push that limit.
Is it just something small? Right? Is it just like a little bit of knee pain? Or is it something that's like every single time it's excruciating, right? Because that's one of those things. If it's something, just it's achy, right? Well, maybe you just need a little bit more movement, prep.
Maybe you just did a little bit too much that, volume and you back it off.
And you need to foam roll a little bit. But like legit, real pain does not go away with good warm-up, right? Those aches and pains, that's part of being an athlete. Right? So if you get in there and you're foam rolling and you're stretching and you're warming up well and sort of those aches and pains go away that we say, you're fine. Train hard. Yeah. Train your ass off. But if you come in, you foam roll and you stretch and your body's still hurting, and it's legit pain. It's a sharp pain. It's around a joint. It's in a muscle. It's not feeling good. If you continue to push into pain, something bad is eventually going to happen. Yep. So that's a big thing,
right?
That
sounds like some sissy-ass shit. I saw the 1998 King of the Ring Hell in a Cell with Mankind and The Undertaker. God, that dude fell from a cage multiple times, and he was still cool.
Didn't he get like something through his lip, like a nail?
His nose, his tooth came through through his nose.
That's crazy.
Oh, my God. That's
his tooth came through his nose.
I feel like that's a little excessive, though. I mean, we're not talking about King of the Ring here.
The cage broke from the top.
He fell down
and then
all
the chair hit him on the way down. So a chair was
You didn't watch wrestling when you were
Dude,
little,
no, I watch wrestling for sure.
Do you remember?
Every young kid watches wrestling when they grew up,
yeah.
right? Sting's gonna bring his bat out, right?
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that was so cool.
Did you play the N64 game when you could go get the bat
World
out?
World Tour.
Oh, yeah.
WO
For sure. I played that.
Then the bat would break after like X amount of years. It's like this never happened on the show. What are you talking about?
Oh, that's awesome.
For sure.
Where the hell were we?
I don't know what we're talking
about. Yeah.
Oh, when would I not let someone squat? If you can't squat good with good technique, I'm gonna take the bar, right?
Sure.
But that goes back to the technique continuum, right?
Right.
You got the optimal technique, right? What our goal is. You've got acceptable, and then you've got poor.
But how do you get people to actually listen to that shit? Because I think
that
everyone listening
thing.
right now is like, cool, yeah, I'm with you on that. Movement versus before blah blah, but like no one follows. It's like kind of like nutrition. Everyone knows not to eat the donut.
If you want to fucking if you want to do the things,
you know what? People listen
doing,
when they start hurting.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You will listen when you start hurting. So sometimes that light needs to come on for you to actually start listening.
When you're about to on the verge of quitting the shit because you're in so much fucking pain, that's when you're gonna.
I mean, I've been in points in my training where
you should never get there.
I'm like I don't care about lifting weights anymore.
Yeah.
You know what? I just want to not
hurt.
I just want to do gymnastics and get flexible. Because I'm so tired of hurting.
Yeah.
And then it wore off, and then I want to get strong again. And
I definitely think that's definitely a thing. Like, you talk about the technique continuum. There's I feel like there's the athlete maturity continuum.
Oh, for sure.
And the longer you've been in the game, the more that stuff you start realizing that.
That's a whole nother topic on just good coaching too. Like you can't you got to know what kind of athlete you're dealing with and say the right things to them.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got someone who's stubborn and that's ready to just beat their head in the wall and doesn't care, you can't be like, look, we're going to be really careful for a few months.
Yeah.
We're going to build your technique up. They're going to be like
whatever. Well, especially if that athlete's been moving poorly for such a long time. Right? Because that's a big thing, right? If you're in that poor category, right, you squat and your knees are touching each other, why is it so important to have that athlete probably stop and take a step back, right? If they're squatting that poor, not only are they setting their body up for eventual injury, right? But as a weightlifter, right, you don't see the injury firsthand, right? It's not all at once. So really to talk to an athlete and be like, hey, you're eventually going to have an injury if you keep on squatting like that. They don't care, right? Because they're already only focused on one thing, right? What's that? Performance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I squat 500 pounds. My knees touch together. Fuck you. Like, I don't care.
Exactly. So that's the thing, though. But the big thing is that you're reinforcing that movement pattern.
Yeah.
The more you squat under load, you reinforce the movement.
Or you can put an electronic collar on.
But I like what you said at the beginning when you opened up the talk. It's like your true potential. Yeah, maybe you squat 500 pounds with your knees touching. But what if you did? Your knees didn't touch.
That's the biggest thing. And
if you squat 600 pounds, fool.
Exactly. The better you squat, quality rise, right? You set yourself up to give yourself the potential to perform more, and you can reach that true strength that Socrates was talking about all those years ago, right? It's all about quality first, right?
Ask yourself how long you want to do it too. Like the most of the people listening to the show right now, do they want to squat for 10 years, 20 years? Like I want to squat for the next 20 years.
Hell yeah, 100%. That's gonna keep your ass out of the fucking nursing home.
Yeah, and I want to squat heavy for 20 years. Like I want to keep getting strong. I know I'm not gonna be stronger forever, but I definitely know there's been times where I'm like, I am not on a path to squat for 20 more years. I will be done in 5 years.
I think my goal now is I just want to be the most jackedest old dude there is. Like, just one of those.
For sure. Yeah. And that's the thing is like the squat. We're talking about how it's a movement first and an exercise second, right? That's something for life.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want just to get you strong to compete right now. I want you to be 70 years old and being able to be functional and walk around and have the life you want, right? Because too often, and obviously as a physical therapist, I see it more often. But people that get to that point in life and they're like, well, I'm not an athlete anymore. I'm done lifting. Right? Or I'm done moving through full ranges. I don't squat anymore, right?
Yeah.
But then what happens, right? They get to that point in life, and now they have trouble keeping up with their grandkids.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
They can't. Eventually, they get to the point where now their knee pain is so bad they can't walk up and down stairs anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And it's all about teaching people, hey, this is something for life. Yes, it's going to help you in your sports for sure. Mm-hmm. There's obviously that application, but the squat is so much more. It's that true strength isn't just from a lifting and performance standpoint, right? It's your ability to live the life functionally that you're capable of.
You know what else is for life?
What's that?
NWO.
Oh my God, that was perfect.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Amazing.
World order.
Hey, has anyone ever asked you where they could sign up and join Squat University?
Yeah. So, Squat University right now is on an online blog platform.
It's not an actual university.
You do a lot of stuff, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, go follow this dude on Instagram for sure.
Enrollment is always open.
There
we go.
There we go.
What's your Instagram handle?
So it's on Instagram, Squat University. I think that's our biggest platform right now. Yeah. Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat's just under my name, Aaron Horschig. And then our main platform is the blog website, squatuniversity.com. Yeah.
Random question. Would you ever make a sister site? Deadlift University.
Dude, the amount of people that have asked me to do deadlift or bench university.
Pulling University.
I have to tell them first, I haven't benched in forever. So
well, you're a weightlifter.
As a weightlifter, I don't bench.
We don't bench.
Exactly.
That's
so
a
yeah,
joke.
You'd be surprised how many people ask me.
That's awesome.
But yeah, the big thing, Instagram's our biggest one. And if anyone has any questions, man, reach out to me, direct message me on Instagram.
You replied a lot.
I reply every single person that direct messaged me on Instagram. I reply to. If you direct message me on Twitter or Facebook, I will get back to you. For sure. I will talk to every single person. Doesn't matter who.
Even the
awesome.
nude DMs? You're part of that?
Don't tell my wife.
I know. Aaron's married, so you don't want to get him in trouble. Never
don't waste your time sending those.
Alex responds to those.
You can send them all to Alex.
Yeah, for sure. At Alex Q. Macklin.
Oh my God. This just got crazy.
Raunchy.
That's awesome. Man, I'm so glad you came on the show, dude.
Dude, it was an honor to be on the show,
man.
guys.
Is there anything else you want to add? Anywhere else people can find you?
Yeah.
Touched on a lot, but
just if you have any questions, reach out squatuniversity.com and on Instagram, Squat University.
Cool. Alex, what you want to add?
I just want to say if you enjoyed this, go sign up for the newsletter at barbellshrugged.com. And then also we got the Shrugged Strength Challenge program. So if you're interested in that, go sign up and do the Shrugged Strength test. Put together a 3-day test to tell you how strong you are and where you're weak and how you can get stronger.
Boom. And then finally, don't forget Barbell Buddha's book just came out, reprinted, all his writings collected into one. Go check it out at barbellbuddha.com to get your own copy. Got a lot of really cool stuff in here, guys.
And finally, you've made it this far into the damn show, so if you like it, go ahead and head over to iTunes, give us a 5-star review.
Give us 5-star rating.
If you don't mind. That really helps.
5 stars.
And then also, if you're on YouTube watching it right now, just go ahead and subscribe so you can get all the content we put out. We're putting out lots of stuff, like a video with this dude.
Oh, yeah.
Nuggets of pearls after this we're going to film. So, do all that
like,
kind of stuff.
Comment,
that stuff helps,
subscribe.
and we appreciate it.
Yeah, we love it. I love getting this. Thank you, Aaron, for coming on.
Yeah.